So if you are an anime fan, you have at least probably heard of the anime movie called Your Name. It was a very popular romance, drama, supernatural movie in 2016 and became one of the most highly acclaimed and popular anime movies. And now the same director has released a new movie called Suzume. I was actually pretty excited about this, not because I'm particularly fond of the director, but because I have personally never seen an anime movie in cinemas. So when I heard that they will be showing it in cinemas here in the UK, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to go and see this. So yeah, that's what I did. I just went to watch it, and now I'm just going to talk a bit about it and my thoughts on it. So like I said, this is by the same director, Shinkai. He's done Your Name, Weathering with You, and a couple of others as well. Now, me personally, I definitely liked Your Name the most out of all his works. And other than that, I thought the rest were just okay. Some of them were just kind of forgettable. Like, for example, the Place Promised in Our Early Days. That was a movie that was pretty forgettable. I only watched it recently, and honestly, I didn't think it was that good. So for me, his movies have a very similar feeling to it, which I think many people can agree with. And some people have complained that his movies are just too similar to each other, and he needs to just do something a bit different. And when I read the kind of like the synopsis for this movie, Suzume, and just watched a bit of the trailer, I already knew that it was gonna be similar. That's sort of what I expected from it. Personally, I would say I do agree a bit with the people who say that his all his projects are just way too similar, and he needs to sort of like add something new, bring some new ideas, and do things differently, especially after this new movie, Suzume. I will say, just right off the bat, this is now, I would say, probably my second favorite movie of his, behind Your Name. I do think it's better than Weathering with You. I wasn't that big of a fan of Weathering with You, especially like, at least the first half of it. I do think it picks up in the second half. But overall, I would say Suzume right now is my second favorite Shinkai movie. So let's just talk about the movie itself. So when I read a bit about the synopsis, I was like, okay, this sounds interesting, but also a bit confusing at the same time. And I was thinking it could end up one of those just like confusing, like convoluted plot type of movies. But yeah, the movie starts off pretty simple. We get introduced to our main character, Suzume. She ends up going, she meets this guy. He asks her about looking for some ruins because he's looking for some kind of door. And then eventually we find out that this door is basically like a portal to like a sort of like natural disaster type of thing. And what he needs to do is just basically close these doors around the country to stop these disasters from happening. And that's what our main character helps the guy out with. But the first thing that I want to say that this movie did really well is just the production value in general. The art, the animation, the soundtrack, they were all really good. There was one particular soundtrack, I think it might be like the main theme of it, that I actually heard online before I watched the movie, and it's very catchy. You probably know what I'm talking about if you've watched the movie. So yeah, in terms of soundtrack, it was actually pretty good. I do think that in general for movies, it is harder to sort of make a soundtrack that really kind of like stands out or like really makes an impact. But for the most part, Suzume actually does that. It does have, one really good catchy song, which I thought it was really good. Now, the animation looks really good. In terms of production value, I mean, it's just really good. And you sort of expect this at this point from these types of movies. They usually look really good. So if there's one thing that they do get right, it's definitely just the visual aspect of it and the soundtrack. Now, speaking of the characters, I would say the main female character, she's not really that different from a lot of main female characters that we've seen in other movies like Your Name or Weathering with You. She's very similar to them. And I thought that in terms of characterizing her, there wasn't much to differentiate her from just a bunch of all these other different characters, which was a bit disappointing. I will say just the characters in general weren't very impressive. The male character, the standard, seemed just kind of like the standard character for this type of story. There were a few side characters, but they really weren't given much importance to the plot or much of an impact. Some of them were just there for like a few comedy jokes, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, our main two characters really were sort of like the main thing about the movie. And like I said, I do think they were a bit disappointing, especially what happens later on in the movie regarding their romance or whatever you want to call it. Because one issue that I really want to talk about this movie, uh, that I think I've seen in a lot of different movies, is just how the relationship progresses, and a lot of the times it's just not believable. Like the romance is not believable. Um, for example, you would have these two characters who they've only just met, they've hardly spent any time together, any meaningful time together, and yet by the end of the movie, they supposedly fall in love with each other, which I don't know, I thought it was pretty silly when it happened. Like, there was a scene where the main female character goes after the male character to save him, and she says something along the lines of, I need to go save the person I love. And honestly, I just kind of laughed when I heard that because their relationship was not believable or like natural. Like they barely knew each other. And, if you watch the movie, especially with the sort of twist that happened to the male character, it makes it even sillier. And I would say that's one criticism I have for the movie. I think just the relationship just didn't feel natural, didn't really feel believable in terms of romance. Now, in terms of the plot, I would say towards the end, like in the final act of it, it just was a bit underwhelming and it became a bit confusing. I don't think the plot overall was that compelling. It was definitely a bit more unique than we've seen. It had this supernatural element going on for it, which was interesting. But overall, I don't know, I just felt like some of the ideas were a bit either not really explained too well, like there were a few things that weren't really explained, or either they were just not done as well as I would have hoped to. So yeah, overall, those were my thoughts on the movie. Like I said, I felt the characters were a bit weak, but the plot had some interesting elements to it, even though some things were left unexplained, and the production values were really high. So overall, I would say I do recommend it, especially if you like these types of movies already. I think this is I wouldn't say it brings something different, but if you do like this sort of genre, these types of movies, I think you will enjoy this one. So yeah, I do recommend it. If you have watched it yourself, then feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you thought about it. Speaking of anime movies, very soon, probably this week, I will be releasing a video about my top 20 anime movies ever. Because recently I've been watching a lot of anime movies. And I feel like now I am ready to make this list and just put out my top 20, maybe give you guys some recommendations on that. I do also plan on making videos about different series, movies, live action stuff. So if you are interested in any of that, do consider subscribing. Yeah, like I said, this next video should be releasing soon. Yeah, I think I'm going to start making that video.